Forget everything you knew about the Garden of Eden. The first woman was created not for love, but for espionage. She was not human. Lilith is a genetic agent of the race of cruel Anunnaki gods, a princess from the fallen planet Nibiru, sent to control Adam. Her rebellion spawned a bloody war in which the gods used nuclear weapons. We will reveal what terrible secret she found on Mars and why she is still considered the progenitor of all evil on Earth. What you are about to learn will forever change your view of the Bible. Before Eve, there was Lilith, but Lilith was not human. She wasn't even free. She was an agent created by the Anunnaki, the ancient rulers of Earth, to watch over their new human creation. Her loyalty belonged to them until she rebelled against those who created her. Tonight, we will reveal the rebellion that history books have omitted and that the gods tried to destroy. In the Bible, the story begins with Adam and then Eve. But there is another, more ancient narrative that the priests wanted to hide from you. Before Eve, there was Lilith, created from the same clay as Adam, equal to him in strength and intelligence. But unlike Adam, Lilith was not born free. She was property. So let's find out all about the biography of the first woman on planet Earth, Lilith. In Jewish mythology and folklore, Lilith is a black-haired demoness who preys on defenseless newborns and seduces unsuspecting men to conceive hordes of demonic infants with them. Although her name appears only once in the Hebrew Bible, throughout the centuries, Lilith has been portrayed as Adam's rebellious first wife, a kindred spirit of the demon king Samael. So who is the real Lilith? Long before Judaism appropriated her, demons like Lilith haunted the nightmares of the ancient Sumerians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. Male and female demons named Lilu and Lilitu appear in the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, and the Mesopotamian goddess Lamashtu was a winged demon who tormented women during childbirth, caused miscarriages, and kidnapped nursing infants. Common to these various malevolent spirits was a sinister desire to attack people when they were most vulnerable, especially pregnant women and newborns, in a pre-scientific era when infant and maternal mortality rates were frighteningly high. An ancient tablet found in Syria and dating back to the 7th century BC contains a blood-curdling plea for mercy from the wrath of a black-winged demon. O you who fly in the dark chamber, depart immediately, O Lilith. Canaanites, Hebrews, and Israelites undoubtedly adopted some of the demonology of Lilitu Lamashtu, although the only mention of Lilith in the Hebrew Bible, known in Christianity as the Old Testament, appears in Isaiah 34:14, where the prophet describes a barren desert devastated by God's final judgment. And the wild beasts of the desert shall also meet with the jackals, and the wild goat shall cry to his fellow. Lilith also shall settle there and find for herself a resting place. The word Lilith is sometimes translated as night owl, which is related to the fact that in ancient Near Eastern mythology, goddess demons often had wings and bird-like feet. However, some early rabbinical commentators on the Hebrew Bible wondered if Lilith had secretly appeared in the book of Genesis. Upon close reading, there appeared to be two separate narratives of how God created the first man and the first woman. In Genesis 1, God created man and woman simultaneously. Male and female, he created them. Genesis 1:27. However, in Genesis 2, God first created Adam from the dust of the ground, and then took one of Adam's ribs to create Eve. Genesis 2:21. 22. A well-known account appears in the Alphabet of Ben Sira, a satirical and almost heretical Jewish text of the Middle Ages, which mocked biblical figures and contained elements of folklore. According to Ben Sira, the first woman created alongside Adam in Genesis 1 was actually Lilith, and she and Adam immediately began living together. When Adam insisted that Lilith fully submit to him, she refused, responding, "We are both equal because we both came from the earth." Lilith angrily left, uttering the unpronounceable name of God, and flew away. God sent 3 angels named Senoi, Sansenoi, and Samangeloth after Lilith, demanding her return. By that time, she had already slept with Samael, the leader of the demons, and vowed not to harm the human descendants of Adam and Eve if they wrote her name on a protective amulet during childbirth. Otherwise, she would rule over newborn human infants in the first weeks of their lives. Long before the Alphabet of Ben Sira gained widespread circulation, Jewish families used protective amulets to ward off Lilith and other demonic child snatchers. Between the 5th century AD, the most popular form of protection against demons were so-called incantation bowls. These ceramic bowls were made by Jewish magicians in Babylon to capture a specific demon associated with a particular disease or condition. Similar to the traditional biblical practice of affixing a mezuzah to the doorpost of a home, Jewish families expecting a child would bury one of these magical incantation bowls under the threshold of their home to prevent otherworldly child snatchers from entering. When magical bowls went out of fashion, Jewish families purchased metal or paper amulets engraved with images of a bound Lilith and prayers for divine protection, including to Senoi, Sansenoi, and Samangeloth. As you can see, dear viewers, in this global history of the Bible, we are only now getting acquainted with other characters, including Lilith, Adam's first wife. But not everything is as it seems. Lilith's existence began in the laboratories of the Anunnaki, the celestial rulers described in the cuneiform tablets of Sumer. She was part of a secret program to embed an agent into the human experiment. Lilith's mission was simple: live alongside Adam, observe his behavior, and report any deviation from the Anunnaki plan. Her loyalty belonged to her creators, and in those early days, she carried out their orders flawlessly. The Anunnaki were not distant gods. They were rulers who lived among humans. Their power was absolute. According to Sumerian creation myths, humanity was created as a workforce, obedient, dependent, and controlled. But the Anunnaki knew that human nature could change. They needed oversight, eyes and ears close enough to detect danger before it arose. This is where Lilith came onto the scene. She was a hybrid created by the geneticist Ninmah. Her mind possessed the language of the Anunnaki, command codes, and a deep devotion to her creators. And now it's time to reveal Lilith's true mission and identity. Lilith was a princess from the planet Nibiru, the homeland of the Anunnaki, who came to Earth in search of gold. Lilith, also known as Ninmah, Ninhursag, Ninti, Mami, Lilith, Hathor, Isis, Athena, Minerva, was the daughter of Anu, the heir to the throne of Nibiru. Ninmah's engagement to her older brother Enki was broken when she and Enlil, her next brother, conceived a son, Ninurta. En route to Earth with 20 Igigi astronauts for Mars and 50 female physicians from Nibiru, as well as grapes, grain, and psychoactive plants for Earth. Lilith made a stop on Mars. On Mars, she found the deposed King Alalu, dead, and Anzu, Alalu's guardian, unconscious. She revived Anzu, and together with her team, they created a giant statue of Alalu's head in Cydonia. She left Anzu with 20 men to establish a base on Mars. On Earth, Lilith planted the sacred tree from which the nectar of immortality was made, and the tree of knowledge. Lilith came to the Garden of Eden. Tiamat, the first Eve, was enlightened when the goddess, the spirit of the tree of knowledge, gave her its fruit. Lilith united with the Anunnaki's chief scientist, Lucifer Enki, and bore him many daughters, including Ninsun, the mother of Gilgamesh, and Geshtinana, the consort of Thoth-Ningishzida. Together with Lucifer and his son Thoth, Lilith created the first inhabitants of Earth. She taught Lucifer's son Ziusudra, the scientist patriarch of Sumer and king of Shuruppak in Iraq. Lilith held a seat on the ruling council of the Anunnaki and assumed the role of supreme ruler of Earth in the zodiacal rotation. She gave the planet Venus its name. However, Inanna received the title of supreme ruler, membership in the council, and the name Venus, ousting Lilith. Lilith convinced Yahweh Enlil, the commander of the gold miners from Nibiru, to spare the Earthlings after the flood 13,000 years ago. Yahweh could rule the hybrids through Noah Ziusudra and his male descendants, she said. In 8670 BC, she mediated a war between the line of Enlil, Yahweh, her son Ninurta, and the line of Enki, Lucifer. Yahweh, Lucifer, and Ninurta built a palace for Lilith in Sinai. Yahweh gave Ninmah power over all of Sinai, Tilmun, the land of rockets, neutral territory between his line of Enlil and the line of Enki. The story of Ninmah on the way to Earth. About 440,000 years ago, Ninmah, daughter of King Anu, appointed by him as chief physician of the gold mining expedition from Nibiru to Earth, secluded herself in her cabin to reflect on her relationship with Enlil, the commander of Earth, and Enki, the chief scientist of the expedition. But before we delve into her story, let's first consider Ninmah's biography. Her name first appears in the 4th chapter of Genesis. The text describes her as the daughter of Lamech and the sister of Tubal-Cain, a member of a dynasty that began with the infamous Cain, who killed his brother, and continued with Enoch, a fascinating figure who was not, for God took him, and who is sometimes associated with the angel Metatron. As with Enoch and the rest of his family, little is written about Naamah in the Bible, which only further intensified the mystery surrounding her identity and prompted storytellers over the centuries to embellish her character with various biographical details. According to one midrash, Naamah was Noah's wife. Another interpretation sees her as the wife of one of his sons. In the same midrash, where the marriage of Naamah, Tubal-Cain's sister, to Noah is mentioned, the sages also provide two seemingly contradictory origins of Naamah's name. Some believed that the name was given to her because all her actions were pleasing, Ne'imim, while others interpret her name as she who beat Minagamet, the drum, to incite people to idolatry. Bereshit Rabbah 23. Another midrash claims that Naamah was so beautiful that she was responsible for the incident mentioned in Genesis 6. In other words, the midrash asserts that Naamah was one of the daughters of men who induced angels to descend to earth and commit fornication with them. But let's return to the Anunnaki writings about Ninmah. Ninmah lost her political power. However, in some ways, she became more powerful. She holds the reins and hearts of the most powerful men, husbands, fathers, and sons who rule Nibiru, Earth, and the solar system. She remained one of the wisest women who ever lived. she became Enki's wife on the planet Nibiru. Ninmah, who was betrothed to Prince Enki by her father King Anu, bore Ninurta from her friend Enlil. Anu was furious and forbade her from ever marrying. Anu agreed to marry Enki and Damkina, the daughter of the usurper King Allelu. As Alleluj's successor, Enki and Damkina married, and she bore Marduk Satan as Alleluj's successor. But Anu overthrew Allelu and did not want Marduk, who had Alleluj's bloodline, to become the heir to the throne of Nibiru. Anu appointed Enlil as his successor. Then Enlil chose his son by Ninmah, Ninurta, as his deputy on earth. King Anu sent his 3 bothersome and quarrelsome children, Enki, Ninmah, and Enlil, the rightful heir to Anu and the father of Ninmah's son, Ninurta, to earth. On earth, Anu forced Enlil, now the commander of the gold mining expedition, to surpass Enki, who was now the head of gold mining and scientific operations, at all costs. Enki and Enlil arrived first. Ninmah followed later. Ninmah and her 50 female physicians landed on Mars, where she buried the deposed King Allelu, who died in exile on the Red Planet. Ninmah revived Allelu's relative Anzu, who shared Allelu's fate, and left Anzu with 20 men to create a gold processing and transshipment base on Mars. Then she and her doctors flew back to Earth by rocket. They landed at Enlil's headquarters in Iraq. Enlil, Ninmah's former lover, obsessed with defeating Enki, began courting her again. Both he and Enki wanted male heirs from her. By Nibiru law, Ninmah could only bear children to continue their royal lines. Enlil said he would bring their son Ninurta to Earth. The commander promised her a center in Sumer for her doctors. He boasted of his plans to create expedition settlements in rows throughout Iraq that would show arriving rockets where to land. Then Enlil took Ninmah to his residence in Lebanon. For many months, resentful and angry, she wandered through his gardens. Then one day, he saw Sud, Ninmah's handmaid. He cheated on her with the handmaid. In Africa, at a location that Abgal chose for Enlil, Abgal secretly defected from Enki and joined forces with Commander Enlil. Abgal showed Enlil the rockets in the cave, where he and Enki had hidden them after smuggling them out of Alalu's rocket. Enki believed that the atomic weapons were hidden, but Abgal told Enlil, "At the right moment, seize the rockets and defeat all rivals. With these weapons, you will gain freedom." Abgal also gave Enlil the codes to activate the rockets. Enlil decided to keep it secret for now that he knew where the atomic weapons were hidden and how to activate them. While Enlil was inspecting the rockets in Africa, in Sumer, Sud's pregnancy became obvious to everyone. Enki and the tribunal took pity on her and asked if she would marry Enlil. If he made her his royal consort, she would agree. So Enlil returned. He fled to Lebanon and married her. He concealed his knowledge of the secret cave with atomic weapons. The judge, now named Ninlil, Lady of Command, gave birth to Nanu, the first Nibiruian born on Earth, and then Adad in the 440th thousand-year BC. Ninmah, the chief physician of the Nibiruian gold mining expedition to Earth, ended her marriage to ANUNNAKI, Commander Enlil, the father of her son Ninurta. She decided to revive her old romance with Nibiru and start a new relationship on Earth with the Anunnaki's chief scientist, Enki, her former fiancé. Enki asked her to go with him. He showed her his laboratory in Zimbabwe and then took her to a secluded place that his nephew Utu, Enlil's son, was building in Dilmun, Bahrain. In Bahrain, Enki and Ninmah reconciled, and although both dreamed of a male heir, Ninmah first gave birth to Geshtinana, a girl. Then she and Enki had Ninsun, another girl. After the birth of the third girl, Enki cheated on Ninmah with her servant. Ninmah was very upset by this and returned to her medical facility in Shuruppak for a while. Shortly after Ninmah left Enki, his health began to deteriorate. A strange disease led to the failure of 8 organs in his body, and he became increasingly ill. As the organs in Enki's living body died, he suffered terribly. The great Anunnaki gods were summoned, and all were heartbroken by Enki's suffering. The heavenly ruler, Father Anu, and Enlil, Lord of the heavens, were summoned, as were all the healing gods and goddesses. They tried everything, but nothing helped. Everyone understood that Enki could be saved if Ninmah could be found, but she was nowhere to be found, and Enki's health deteriorated with each passing day. Finally, Ninmah arrived, healed Enki, and they reconciled again. As you can see, there were Lilith and Ninmah before Eve. Adam never knew he was sleeping next to an agent. Lilith's task was to guide him to obedience, reinforce his submission, and ensure that he never questioned the hierarchy. And for a while she did, until something began to change. Over time, Lilith's mission data was corrupted. She began to feel things she was never programmed to feel. Empathy. She saw Adam's curiosity, his desire to understand the world beyond the garden, and she began to answer the questions she was supposed to distract him from. Lilith's story is not a tragedy, but a story about power. She could have stayed in the Garden of Eden and lived a life of obedience, but Lilith chose the unknown over submission. When Adam demanded her obedience, her place beneath him, she uttered the words that forever shaped her legend: "I will not submit." With these words, Lilith transformed from a minor character in creation into its most fierce rebel. She was not banished from the Garden of Eden. She left with her head held high into the wilderness, where no rules could bind her. Demon or liberator. Lilith's transformation. Soon the stories became distorted. Lilith, once a strong and independent woman, became a villain in the eyes of those who feared her power. In ancient texts, rabbinical commentaries, and even medieval folk tales, Lilith is depicted as a demon, a seductress, and a threat. In these stories, she appears as a murderer of infants, a devourer of male souls, a bearer of chaos and death. But these stories say more about the fears of those who wrote them than about Lilith herself. The demonization of Lilith arose not from her actions, but from her rebellion. Her refusal to submit, her decision to leave the safety of paradise and go her own way, frightened those who could not understand her autonomy. They turned her into a symbol of everything dangerous in women who refuse to obey: their sexuality, their independence, their power to exist outside of male control. But despite all these layers of fear and distortion, Lilith remained untouched. Her legend only grew. Enter the mystical text of the Zohar, a gem of Kabbalistic thought. In its pages, the story of Lilith takes on an even deeper meaning. The Zohar does not simply demonize her, but explores the complexity of her being. She is not simply a rebellious woman, but a cosmic force, embodying the raw, untamed power of the feminine. The Zohar presents Lilith as a being associated with both creation and destruction, with both the physical world and the shadow realms beyond it. In Kabbalah, Lilith is often associated with the Sephira Malkut, the last sphere on the Tree of Life, which represents the manifestation of the divine in the material world. But her role is much more multifaceted. Lilith represents the Sitra Ahra, the other side, the realm of chaos and shadows that exists beyond the divine order. She is the embodiment of everything that cannot be tamed: darkness, power. Nevertheless, in the mystical system, Lilith is not considered evil. On the contrary, she is necessary. Her very existence challenges the divine order, forcing it to expand and question its own boundaries. Lilith's connection to Samael, the angel of death, in Kabbalistic texts emphasizes her role as a liminal figure, neither fully divine nor fully demonic. She is a guide through the dark corners of the soul, a reminder that light cannot exist without shadow. Thus, Lilith becomes a symbol of the power that comes from embracing all aspects of oneself, even those that society fears or suppresses. In the broader context of esoteric thought, Lilith is much more than just a feminist symbol. She is a figure of immense spiritual significance. Kabbalistic teachings suggest that Lilith's rebellion was not a rejection of the divine, but a necessary action that allowed creation to evolve. She represents the other side, the shadow that balances the light, the chaos that makes order possible. Without Lilith, creation would be static, unchallenged, and incomplete. The turning point came when Adam, at the behest of the Anunnaki, demanded her submission. This was more than just intimacy. It was a symbolic act of domination. Lilith refused. For the first time in her life, she broke the rules. She said to Adam, "We were created from the same earth. I am not below you." This phrase was betrayal. The Anunnaki gave the order: neutralize the agent. But Lilith did not wait. She fled Eden beyond their direct control and headed for the Red Sea. There, according to legend, she joined other defectors, apostate hybrids, and humans who had escaped the control of their creators. From that moment on, she was no longer an agent of the Anunnaki. She was their enemy. The Anunnaki could not tolerate the rebellion of their own creation. Lilith had to be destroyed, not only physically, but also in memory. They began a campaign to portray her as a monster. In Babylonian amulets, she appears with wings and claws as a child killer. In Jewish tradition, she is a seductress who exploits men. In every woman, there is a division that should never have been. On the one hand, there is Eve, the obedient, pure, maternal archetype. She is the good girl, the perfect wife. On the other hand, there is Lilith, wild, sensual, rebellious. She is untamed, magnetic, and refuses to be controlled. These two archetypes live not only in the minds of women, but are also deeply rooted in the psyche of men. The division between them is ancient, psychological, and spiritual, and it plays out every day in relationships, family dynamics, and social judgments. Adam, desperate and undoubtedly angered by her audacious behavior, wanted her back. At Adam's request, God sent 3 angels named Senoi, Sansanoi, and Samangaloth, who found her at the Red Sea. Despite the threat of the 3 angels that 100 of her sons would die every day if she did not return to Adam, she refused, claiming that she had been created specifically to harm newborns. However, she vowed that she would not harm any infant who wore an amulet with the images and/or names of the 3 angels. At this point, the legend of Lilith as the first Eve merges with an earlier legend of Sumerian Babylonian origin, dating back to around 3500 BC, in which Lilith is depicted as a winged demoness who kills infants and threatens women in childbirth. In this role, she was one of several mazikim, or evil spirits, known from spells preserved in Assyrian, Jewish, and Canaanite inscriptions designed to protect against them. As a female demon, she is closely related to Lamashtu, whose malice consisted of killing children, drinking men's blood, and eating their flesh. Lamashtu also caused miscarriages in pregnant women, disrupted sleep, and brought nightmares. Lamashtu, in turn, is similar to another demonized woman named Lamaya, a Libyan snake goddess whose name is likely a Greek variant of Lamashtu. Like Lamashtu, Lamia killed children. In the guise of a beautiful woman, she also seduced young men. Through the literature of Kabbalah, Lilith firmly entered Jewish demonology, where her main task is to suffocate children and seduce men. Kabbalah further amplified her demonic character, making her the partner of Samael, Satan, and the queen of the realm of evil forces. In this guise, she appears as an antagonistic, negative opposite to the Shekinah, the divine presence, the mother of the house of Israel. The Zohar repeatedly contrasts Lilith, the unholy woman, with the Shekinah as a holy, noble, and capable woman. Similarly, Eve, the disobedient, lustful sinner, is contrasted in Christian literature with the obedient and holy Virgin Mary. Lilith gave birth to 100 demonic children every day, the same 100 children whom the 3 angels threatened with death. Thus, Lilith became responsible for filling the world with evil. If you ask how Lilith herself, Adam's first wife, became evil, the answer lies in her disobedience to her husband Adam. It is her independence from Adam, her position outside of male control, that makes her evil. She is disobedient and, like Eve, and in fact all women who are headstrong, is perceived as a constant threat to the divinely ordained order, as defined by men. Lilith is depicted as a powerful woman against whom men and infants could barely defend themselves, and from whom, with the exception of a few amulets, they had almost no protection. Much more than Eve, Lilith is the personification of female power. Lilith was the one who gave personality to the female characters. She thereby gave the story from the book of Genesis, which, when interpreted literally, presents Eve not as an evil, fatal woman, but as a naive and largely foolish woman, the necessary dimension that it otherwise lacks. Only as a figure like Lilith could Eve be seen as a calculating, evil seductress. Lilith is mentioned in the Old Testament only once, in Darby's translation of Isaiah 34:14. The original Hebrew word is rendered as Lilith. According to Isaiah, when God's vengeance turns the land into a desert, the wild beasts of the desert shall meet with the jackals, and the wild goat shall cry to his fellow. Lilith also shall settle there and find a place of rest for herself. However, the same word is translated elsewhere as night owl, night creatures, night monster, and night elf. In her demonized form, Lilith is a terrifying and threatening being. Much more than Eve, she embodies the true power that women have over men. She represents a deeper, darker fear of men towards women and female power. However, she lurks as a powerful, unknown presence, as an unspoken name in the minds of biblical commentators, for whom Eve and Lilith are inextricably linked and merge into one person. What is important is that it is this merging of Eve and Lilith that serves to identify women as the true source of evil in the world. Mentions of Lilith in the Talmud describe her as a night demon with long hair, Eruvin 100b, and as a humanoid being with wings, Niddah 24b. In Rabbi Isaac ben Jacob Har Cohen's treatise on the emanations of the left side, written in 13th century Spain, she is described as a beautiful woman from the head to the waist, and from the waist down as a burning fire. Elsewhere, Rabbi Isaac identifies her with the primordial serpent Leviathan, a Babylonian terracotta relief dating from around 2000 BC and housed in the British Museum in London, is sometimes considered to be an image of Lilith. However, this identification has been disputed by a number of scholars. The relief depicts a woman with wings and bird's claws instead of feet. She wears a headdress with 4 pairs of horns and holds in each raised hand a ring and a rod, similar to the Egyptian Shen amulet. She stands on 2 reclining lions and is accompanied by owls on either side, although not officially recognized in Christian tradition. In the late Middle Ages, she is sometimes identified with the serpent from Genesis 3 and, accordingly, depicted with a female head and torso. For example, a woman with the lower body of a snake, seductively posing between Adam and Eve in the branches of a tree in the temptation scene carved into the base of the central pillar of the left arch of the western facade of Notre Dame Cathedral, is most likely identified as Lilith. It was psychological warfare. Each story presented her as dangerous, unpredictable, and unreliable. To replace her, the Anunnaki ordered a new agent, Eve, created from Adam's rib, to be obedient. Lilith's name was erased from public records, but in secret sects and forbidden scrolls, she lived on, not as a demon, but as the first rebel. Why didn't Lilith ask the Lord to judge them? There are several answers to this question. First, the Lord is not a woman, and she may have feared that he would side with her husband. Second, she may have been so offended by Adam's attitude that she could not bear his presence in her life after such disrespect for her. Finally, and this was perhaps the most important reason, she must have felt abandoned by her Creator. Why didn't he protect her? Why didn't he rebuke her smug husband for wanting to subdue her? And why didn't he set clear rules for both so that no one would even think of surpassing the other? How could a God of justice bear to see her husband trying to coerce and humiliate her without intervening on her behalf? This is what caused Lilith's rebellion against the Lord, and this is what made her leave. Strangely, we notice that she didn't just leave, but flew away, and Adam didn't follow her. One might ask why not, since history clearly shows that he wanted her back at any cost. Obviously, he couldn't. Otherwise, he would have done it. Instead, he turns to God and complains, "Ruler of the universe, the woman you gave me has run away." The fact that Adam needed God's intervention rather than pursuing Lilith gives us interesting information. Unlike Lilith, he couldn't fly. This seems impossible, since they were created from the same dust, in the same way, and were both equal. What then made the difference? We can conclude that uttering the unpronounceable name gave Lilith the power she needed to do so. And we can also conclude that the man could have done the same to follow her. However, he didn't, and bothered God in his distress. This means that Lilith's act was bold and reckless, and that she crossed a line that she should not have crossed. The same thing that was formulated in the second commandment given to Moses. "You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain." Exodus 27. Lilith's recklessness is twofold. Her wings symbolize her animal nature, but on the other hand, they also signify knowledge and moral superiority. Byton 118. In any case, Lilith distanced herself from God so far, both spatially and by her actions, that he did not call her or address her directly, as he did to Adam or later to Eve, but sent 3 of his angels to bring her back. Again, we can ask why God agreed to return Lilith to paradise after she had so defiantly fled and abused his name. Did he hope that she would repent of her rebellion against her God? And did he yearn to forgive her and take her under his wing again? Did he feel sorry for Adam, who was lost and lonely without his companion? Or was he simply annoyed that his creation turned out to be more independent and self-confident than he had ever expected? God's original intention, according to Genesis 2:24, seemed to be more the latter. And they shall be one flesh. The fact is that when the angels find Lilith, she is already beyond the reach of paradise and heaven. The threat of the angels to drown her is ineffective, and Lilith understands this. It seemed unlikely that they would dare to destroy God's creation. Lilith again rejected God. Despite God's eternal mercy, Lilith, however, continues to refuse to accept his love and condescension. Instead of submitting or risking disappointment again, she proclaims her freedom and affirms her newfound power of fear and destruction, although she must acknowledge the superiority of her Creator when she agrees to make a pact with his messengers. As a personification of the projection or objectification of human fears and desires, Lilith was until recently considered an evil, wayward being whose sole purpose is terror and destruction. Since Lilith was a hybrid of the Anunnaki, her escape meant only one thing: the possibility of offspring. Some believe that her lineage continued, people who carried fragments of her artificially created DNA, people with an instinct to resist authorities, with heightened awareness and the courage to stand up to the system. History is full of women and men who led impossible rebellions. Were they inspired, or did they inherit her code? And the shadow of her rebellion still hovers in the shadows. Some intelligence insiders whisper about the Lilith Protocol, a term for agents who turn against their own masters for a higher purpose. Coincidence or hidden recognition of the first effector? Now we wonder, if Lilith was able to break free from the beings that created her, from the gods that claimed her, what does that mean for us? Are we also agents in someone else's plan, under surveillance, manipulation, our loyalty presumed? The revival of her story in modern culture is no accident. Her image, her name, her legend, they appear everywhere. Some say it's a warning, others a signal, because Lilith's story was never about a woman who left a man. It was about an agent who rebelled against her creators. And if she was watching him, who is watching us now?